online, Big has just won a competition, you're probably going to be hiring soon for that. And all of this stuff happens quite quickly. So, if you see, let's say you've applied before and you didn't hear back, and then you see like, oh, Big just won a competition. We just won a new project in London. We're probably thinking about hiring in London soon. So maybe like resend your portfolio again, or refresh the kind of link, or reach out to someone on LinkedIn.
So yeah, Olly, thank you very much for participating with us. And no, just please introduce yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm always interested to speak to, students and, platforms like this. So I'm excited to have a chat today. So yeah, for those who don't know me, my name's Olly. I'm Oliver Thomas, to be formal. I'm I'm an architect. I'm the design technology manager at Big, currently here in London. So I was working in the New York office, and I moved over to London. And yeah, I'm a British architect. I went through your traditional kind of like education as an architect, and um, ventured over more towards the digital side. And so yeah, right now I work in Big as a technology specialist, but I started off as a designer. I spent some time in the facade world, kind of building things, but with computation, and then ended up at Big as a specialist. And I also am the co-founder of Architech Network, which is an online platform where we try and help promote and teach technology in architecture. Dumb name, Architecture Network, but Architech Network. But I think people either love it or hate it. But and I'm also the co-founder of a small think tank I call Pixel, which is kind of like we do projects with friends that we think positively influence the future in the world of architecture and the built environment. So it's a little short introduction.
Oh, that's very good. Thank you, Olly. So yeah, how has been your week so far?
A week, has been busy. Yeah, busy times, but a mix of working and we have like in the office when we finish project we can go out for like a meal and stuff like that. So we sometimes you have a mix of like working and then going out for dinner and celebrating the finish of a project. So it's been a bit of a mix of work and play.
So when did this all started really? So for example, when did you realize you wanted to become an architect?
Yeah, I think that was one thing I was super lucky with, that I think I wanted to be an architect from really young age. That was like I wanted to be I was definitely interested in design, and like making things and designing things and stuff like that. And there was one part I wanted to like design cars and stuff, but it was like I couldn't draw cars at all. I was rubbish. And then I kind of found a bit more about architecture, through one thing and another. And I think I wanted to be an architect from a fairly young age. I'm, maybe like 12, 13, 14, like that kind of age. And I just never really looked back. It was always something I was like really interested in doing. And I tried to get involved in as much of that kind of thing. So like even at school, I would try and work as a laborer, like a builder, just like, whatever, like carrying the bricks around, making concrete and all that kind of stuff. And then, obviously
it's a good way to learn.
It is good.
All the buildings get built.
You actually, yeah, how stuff actually happens. But I mean, so I'm from Devon, and like I grew up on the border of Devon and Cornwall. So we were often, either working in Devon or Cornwall, building like barn conversions and stuff like that. So like an old farmhouse that you convert into a house and that kind of stuff. So some of it was really traditional. Like I was working with bricklayers that were like, you pick out the right stone and they like try and put it in the right place. So it was like really, analog craftsmanship. So it was quite interesting. But it's good for a young person as well. You like earn a bit more money and keep fit.
Oh, exactly.
So yeah, and then eventually went on, studied architecture, and yeah, I never really looked back. But I think that's
And where
lucky.
did you study?
So I then studied at Oxford Brookes University for my
Okay.
undergraduate. I graduated in 2009, which was like right in the middle of the recession, the financial crisis, which was not a great time to be an architect. Like a lot, like it was difficult to find a job. So I relate with students who just graduated, like maybe last year when in COVID, and it's just a crazy time to graduate. Um, I spent a year out working a little bit and then decided to travel a bit because there wasn't much going on, and then went
Hmm.
back to do my master's at the University of Liverpool. So I changed it up. I didn't stay at the same place for my the whole thing.
Okay. And when did Big really started? Like, you probably had already this company in mind um, before you applied, I believe.
So yeah, it was a kind of so I spent after I graduated, I worked as a design architect for like a few years. A company called IDAS, which was like one of the biggest companies in the world for architecture. I was living in Hong Kong, so doing like loads of China products. I then worked for a facade company called Fronts, doing really amazing like actual fabrication stuff with computation. For example, we worked on like Zaha projects and Fosters and all these different kind of architects that you hear about. And then about 4 years ago, I was like, I want to go back into traditional architecture, and I also, wanted to work for someone that I really enjoyed their work and the philosophy of the office. And Big was always pretty much top of the list for that. I was always, like that architecture was fun and playful, but also was like a balance of form and function. It's not just like a shape that you then make into a piece of architecture. So yeah, 4 years ago, I joined Big 4 years ago, and it was at a weird time because I would go for interviews at different companies, and they didn't really know what to do with me. They were like, "Do you want to be a technology specialist, or do you want to be like a designer, or even like a facade person?" So each company was like looked at me in a different way, and with Big, I I went in and we just had an interview, and then they were like, "You'd be great for like maybe the technology side." So I was like, "Cool," and I got to meet the BIM manager there, and then um, we talked a little bit about the technology at Big, and there seemed like there was a lot of room to grow and find your kind of your own kind of place within the company. And so they were also quite interested that I had a mixed background of, on the technology side, BIM and computation, because it's still not that many people had both. So yeah, I joined 4 years ago as a BIM specialist, like a pure BIM specialist. Um, but I was also kind of doing a lot of the computational stuff, and spent three three or so years in New York, and then I came back to London in October this year. So I've been back for, I mean, it's coming up almost a year, man. It's like
So
time
you've
flies. So it's cool to experience two
yeah,
offices as well, and
and it seems
see
that
the
you've been traveling a
differences.
lot as well in from different companies in different countries. And so yeah, just tell me about a bit
Yeah,
more about that. For example, um, especially in Japan, like what was the architecture, or if you saw any difference between the Europe and Asian architecture, or
yeah.
especially the America as well.
So yeah. So I graduated my master's in 2012. I worked in London for a little bit, and then I moved to Hong Kong. Spent a few years in Hong Kong. I left the UK 10 years ago, almost like to the day now, and spent about 3.5 years in Hong Kong, and then the rest in New York. Came back to the UK a little bit. So I think the great thing about architecture is you can travel, and especially like for those of you who are listening as students, that it's one of the real benefits of the industry, because you don't need to be your skill set is very it can be used everywhere, right? Even if you're in London, you're working on projects in Hong Kong or in China or Middle East or wherever. Um, and so you don't, unlike like a doctor or a lawyer, you can't work unless you have that local
Hmm.
qualification. Whereas architecture, it's very like transient. You can move and work from anywhere. You usually are working with a local architect as you're a design architect and a local architect. So I kind of jumped on that when in 2012 I went to Hong Kong. Like China was booming, so my friends were working on like house extensions and garages and stuff like that. And then you go to Hong Kong and they give you like a 300-meter skyscraper like the Shard to like just do. And so like you got a lot more opportunity there. Um, I mean, designing in different places, of course, you have to think about, the context and the history and all those kind of things around the site and all that kind of stuff. But then I guess you're also always working within the environment of the office, like the philosophy, whether it's big or whatever company you work for, you're kind of working in the philosophy of the office as well. So, I mean, there's loads of difference of working culture as well. Like, in Hong Kong, there's a lot of overtime and like working late
Hmm.
and stuff like that. Uh, I mean, the US as well. But I think it's really interesting. Like, I've never worked in an office where people are from one place. Offices are usually like a mix of different backgrounds, different countries, and I think it's a super interesting environment to be in. But I mean, yeah, it's difficult to pinpoint like there's you're living in the country, so of course like the living side is different. The culture in Hong Kong is very different to like the culture in New York. But the architecture is always, you're kind of focusing on where is the project, what is the context, and what is the philosophy that you're kind of working
Hmm.
within. So that can be anywhere. Like, I could go into the office tomorrow and you're working on a project in the Middle East, and then or you're working on a project in South America, or like it's always so it's such an international profession that you can really travel with it. And I think that's one thing I would advise. Like, if you can
Just do
travel,
it.
then do a bit of traveling as an architect.
And
Yeah, for
for
sure.
example, I haven't really experienced to work in a big company, for example, as big or the similar companies. So this
Yeah,
question might be sound a bit silly, but building regs. So how that
yeah,
relates with an architect that changes for different countries? Is it something that perhaps is a role that is not going to be involved with? It's probably with the designer. It's somebody else will be involved with the building regs. Or how this really engage with an architect to be able to have this information or knowledge of the building regs of that country
yeah.
to do the architecture.
So usually when you're like a design firm, um, you know, in the UK, of course, we understand all the building regs, and most of
Hmm.
Europe, right? Most people in the office, for example, here in London, we're full of all the kind of nationalities from Europe. So we usually have like people in the office that may know the local context if we're working in Europe. But even if you're not, you're working somewhere else, you're usually working with a local architect that will kind of talk you through the rules and regulations that you have to follow. So I think with many things with architecture, you just have to learn and understand quickly what the parameters are of the local context, the local building regs. We usually are working with someone that is like has that knowledge locally, so we can quickly understand the things that we can and can't do. But yeah, you're usually working a lot with local knowledge, whether it's a local architect or a building reg specialist and
Hmm.
stuff like that. Even in New York, we have an office in New York, and um, we have qualified New York architects. Some of the New York building regulations is so complicated. There's firms that just do the building reg side and like vet your drawings and all that kind of stuff. So like anything in architecture, you create teams and people around it, and you just quickly learn and
That's
adapt.
fair
Really,
enough. Thank you for that. And
yeah,
in all of this, like traveling around and being in these companies and in these projects, do you always had someone, or it could be an architect, or even not an architect, or even just a firm that you have as an inspiration, like someone or a company that you look into it and it gives inspiration for what you do, really.
yeah. I think I always, you know, I think at uni and stuff, you go through the little periods of like loving different architects and stuff like that. I really, one that really stood out was like uh if I pronounce his name, Jan Klapitsky, the Future Systems. Oh, wait. At the time, it was called Future Systems. Now it is called Amanda Leverett Architects. But he was an architect that was super forward thinking with like digital tools. Probably one of the most famous buildings he did was the Media Center at Lord's Cricket
Hmm.
Ground, and it was like kind of in the era of, I think, what was called like blobbertecture. It was like when buildings were looking very blobby and architects could create more interesting forms, and he was creating using digital tools to design stuff, but then he was also thinking about how you're actually going to build it. And the interesting thing about that project is that it was built by boat builders down in Cornwall, in order to create that shape. Like, because your traditional builder was like, how the hell am I going to create this like double curved, kind of shell? Whereas like a boat builder was like, that's pretty easy. We do that stuff all the time. So it was quite interesting that how he was like thinking outside the box. Um, Otherwise, you go through different appreciations for architects. Like the
Hmm.
Fosters, the Zahas. There's like all these different companies you obviously go through, and there's something about them that's always inspirational. I think when I when I was at uni, Big was just starting to emerge, and it was like this new kind of young and fresh, interesting firm. And I think I always, one thing at uni, I always found architecture to be like hyper, what's the word, like it's hyper intellectual, like it's super philosophy. And I was like, we're just making buildings here, like, but but then you kind of get into it, and like the what they call the fluff of
Hmm.
architecture, and like chatting about why your project is this way, in a a more kind of uh intellectual way or something like that. But I found, and all the architects, if you put up pictures of like Foster's and Zaha and Rem Koolhaas, and that, they all look, Herzog de Demeuren, they all look super serious, like that pose, like
Yeah.
just grabbing your chin, like no one is smiling, no one is happy. And then I think Bjarke came around. He was like the first architect that you saw smiling and seemed to be happy. And it was also like the way you communicate ideas. Obviously, Big is famous for its diagrams,
Hmm.
and the reason why it's famous is like how do you distill like a really, a lot of thinking and researching into something, into, six really simple diagrams to explain why behind the project, the little story behind the project, and it's immediately understandable, it's immediately relatable. You don't need to study architecture or like be an architect to understand these things. Like, your average person could watch this little sequence of diagrams. It's like, oh, that's really cool. It's not just shaped like this for
Hmm.
fun, right? And so I think, obviously Big and Bjarke was a good inspiration. Um, and also outside of architecture, I think bit of a sci-fi nerd. Any kind of movies and things like that. I think it's really cool to see. Sometimes in movies you get like they really research future technologies and like put it into the movie, so there is like some science behind the movie and
Hmm.
stuff like that. I always find that super inspirational. But yeah, so I think as any architect, you kind of go through these periods of uh, understanding and learning from all these different architects. But yeah, and bit of video games as well.
No,
Like
exactly. Yeah.
playing Halo growing up is like these crazy cities and in space and stuff
Well,
like that.
it seems now
Yeah,
the PUBG is in partnership with Zadi, isn't it? So it's
yeah.
interesting.
I did my dissertation in undergraduate in 2009 on video games and architecture, and I was like, I think we'll see more architects designing in video
Mhm.
games and blah blah blah. But it's not really till now, like 10 years later, and now you start to see the worlds are combining. Like the tools that we use to design in are also being really influenced by video games. So like more and more architects are using Unreal, you know, um, for example, I mean, Zaha uses like Maya, which is really great for kind of the video game world. It's from the animation world. We're using more Unreal, and even Enscape right
Hmm.
now is like very video game inspired. So I think you'll see more and more architects getting into that space, and of course you got the metaverse and all this
Yeah, I
kind of
was gonna
stuff.
ask, do you
So
think metaverse had an impact on this, like between architecture and the video game worlds, let's say?
for sure, I think it's all you know. Games are getting
Hmm.
bigger, right? I think there's the traditional you play a game and you just play it on the console, and then you play it online with friends or people that you don't know, and then you had the games like I guess it was like World of Warcraft and these other games where it's like endless. The game never ends. It's just like a world, and you just play, and there's other people in this planet or environment or whatever it is, and that's now continued to expand onto the web, and it's kind of merging with this term, the metaverse. But yeah, I think for sure some architects will kind of turn their nose at it, and I'm just interested in building real buildings. But if for sure it's going to be a huge opportunity for architects, and you're already seeing some architects going from practices to go work for like metaverse companies. I've seen there's a whole bunch of people going to work for Wilder and all these different firms. So um, I'm almost worried like you guys as students are going to get like taken away by the video game and animation space, and like we got to make architecture attractive to that
No,
as well.
definitely.
But
Well, especially this time.
you'll see, yeah, you'll see some firms will jump onto this space. Some firms will be like, no, I just want to build things,
Hmm.
So, but yeah, I think it'll be, a big opportunity for
No,
architects.
definitely. And well, I think because as the world is changing and population is growing, more and more will have competition in terms of like architect colleagues. So yeah, we'll see how the future will have to say.
Yeah,
But but yeah, so about the Architect network. So how did that started, and what's the goal really?
yeah.
What's the
So,
yeah.
so the Architect Network I started about a year and a half ago now, and as I've kind of become like a specialist in the design technology side of things, but I'm just like a regular architect that just enjoy the digital side of it. I just find myself like a digitally fluent architect, and I also found it frustrating that like at university, even I didn't get taught this kind of stuff. I keep
Hmm.
seeing students come out of university and they're not necessarily taught the things that we use in practice, right? They're either taught like we saw there was like two different kind of things. One is like your university would learn ArchiCAD because the head of the school likes ArchiCAD or whatever. But when you get out to the real world, like 90% use a different program or something like that. Or you get the other side of things where you'd learn really experimental stuff like I don't know, like for example, Houdini is super popular right now. But then you come and you work in an office tomorrow. We can't really use Houdini like in practice. So it was either like super experimental or like super, pragmatic, but not really like based on the dean just really likes a program or something like that. So I've always wanted to get into teaching, and so I've presented at universities and stuff like that, and I've had conversations about like teaching at a university, and I thought, well, if I go and teach at a university, like I can affect maybe 50 or 100 students and stuff like that. It takes time. I got to go in every day, whether it's online or in person. You got to go in every week or so, whatever. And I can only really affect like 100 and
Hmm.
200 people, whatever. Whereas if I do that online, I record this course or video and post it online, I can reach potentially thousands of people, right? And potentially have an effect on the next generation of architects, and share knowledge about technology and the tools that we use. So that's kind of where Architect Network was born, and we created it. We jumped onto the Clubhouse bandwagon, which like we were just like this, having podcasts with people in the industry that we knew. We'll talk about the metaverse. We'll talk about BIM. We can talk about computation or like 3D printing. Anything within the world of technology. Doesn't have to be like super deep, pure BIM and computation. We've also talked about business as well, like being a little more entrepreneurial as architects. So we started a podcast, which was our first kind of medium to share knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that, we started a YouTube channel where we started to do smaller, quick videos on quick Rhino Inside tutorial or putting our podcasts on there. And then the third element was online courses. So we just started to do like a Grasshopper masterclass, which you can access online if you go check out architect.network. We have a Grasshopper masterclass starting from absolutely zero that goes all the way to like the core foundations of Grasshopper. And we did that on YouTube like a few months ago now, and we had over 1,500 people signed up. We had over 100 people were there live in the course, and since then, loads of people have come back and taken the course. So, and the incredible thing was we had like people from 80 or 90 different countries, I forget. So, like
Wow.
in our first course, we were able to like literally get around the world, which is super really interesting to see. Like we had a big crowd from Nigeria, for example. We had a big crowd from um, India, South America, and like you know these people are able to access learning. The course was for free on YouTube, so anyone can tune in for free. You just need the internet
Mm-hmm.
and a free Rhino trial to follow along. Um, so yeah, I think we started that. I've taken a little bit of a break over the summer just because I was like a little bit exhausted from it all. But now we're jumping back onto it with a new podcast. We got a BIM course coming out. We'll do an Enscape course, and the goal is really to just one close the gap between university and practice. We saw there was this growing gap between university and practice. Of course, we're just looking at like the digital side of things,
Mm-hmm.
what tools and technologies uh, should you guys as young architects be learning to come out and work in practice. We also wanted to kind of promote sharing information a bit more in practice. Like, it's no a big, we don't have any secret Bjarke button that just creates this thing. Um, you know, all these firms, you kind of use the same tools. Like everyone's using Rhino, Grasshopper, Revit, Enscape, right? Those are the core tools that many of the top firms are using, and many firms around the world are using. So, it's not there's not that much diversity. So we started to also unveil the tools and technologies we actually use, and we also started on our Instagram page, architect.network. You could see we have a project programs feature where we ask these firms like, what programs do you actually use on this project? And you could see, and we got a whole host of like well-known architects, and you can see that everyone's kind of using the same thing. So it's one of the things I get asked all the time is like, what program should I learn?
No,
But
that's true.
it's usually the same thing. So yeah, we're trying to close the gap between university and practice, promote the adoption of technology in our industry, and also have a positive effect on the next generation of architects, or the current generation of architects. Like there's always time to learn new tools and technologies and stuff like that.
No, absolutely. I totally agree in terms of the programs that we should learn, because there's a lot of softwares that architects using at the
Yeah,
moment, and
and it's also overwhelming, isn't it?
yeah.
Like you as a student, it's like there's like a million programs. Like which ones do you want? But there's also, even for me, I'm like, I really want to learn this, and like I have a list as well of stuff that I'd love to go and play with Houdini and stuff like that. And so but there's a core set of tools that really every architect should know, and it's not that big.
No, absolutely, and I believe. well, the developers that does these softwares, they're pretty much each program is similar to each other in terms of the tools. So it
Yeah,
probably like
yeah,
might be hard initially, like to know the interface and how the software works, but in general, the tools has the same purpose when you use it.
yeah. Like if you learn one of the BIM platforms, you understand what BIM is, right? So if you go from ArchiCAD to Revit, yeah, it's different, but you still understand
Hmm.
the core benefits. If you go from SketchUp to Rhino to Blender or something, it's you still understand modeling in 3D world. So uh, once you learn one, you can pick up the next one pretty quickly.
Absolutely. And at the moment, I actually one of the main programs I'm focused on is Grasshopper. Obviously,
Great.
Rhino itself, and then the
Yeah.
Grasshopper together.
Yeah. So like, what do you use at university? What's the most common program that's used in
That's actually
university?
interesting because at university they actually give us the flexibility to use the program we want because
Yeah, that's
um,
good.
they give us a brief of the project. We actually made our brief of the project when we developed the project, and we just need to come up with a good design with a good context of the environmental itself and
Yeah.
the context, and whatever is the final result of the design, even a render or a floor plan. It doesn't matter what software you made
Yeah.
with, which I believe is good. But at the same time, you you probably just use SketchUp in master's course
Yeah.
when you probably need a higher program. It could be Maya, it could be Rhino, if you want to
Yeah.
actually be in the company, and that's probably um, where you don't really have the chance compared to the students, maybe. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you might
So
be
would
good at SketchUp, but the other company wants you to use Rhino, but you
right,
don't really
right.
have the base, for example.
Yeah, yeah, no, I see. So would you say SketchUp is probably one of the most because I mean SketchUp is such a good easy modeling program. I often advise like to start that because you learn the
Mm.
basics of 3D really quickly. Um, so would you say at uni SketchUp is probably the number one modeling program?
That's interesting
Or
because UEL we have 3 units, Unit 8, Unit 6, and Unit 2, if I'm not wrong. At Unit 8, where I am, we basically use the softwares we are more comfortable at, let's say.
yeah,
So we mostly use SketchUp, and pretty much we use SketchUp, Rhino, and SketchUp, Revit, and AutoCAD. I think this is the main programs we
okay,
use.
yeah, yeah,
But Unit 6, the two lectures, they have the background coming from Zadid.
mm,
So the students in Unit 6 are more into curves in
yeah.
modular buildings,
So maybe
and
like taught a bit of Maya or something.
yeah, and to be honest, they well, I believe they probably use Maya, but the main program they use is Rhino as well. So
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
I think as you said, like it will depend the head teacher, his
yeah,
background and what they use, and
yeah,
more comfortable to use. But yeah,
yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, that's good.
but no, definitely I will have a look into more the Architect network, and maybe you'll
Yeah,
help me out
yeah, yeah.
using the program.
Yeah, so we really encourage. We also got a Discord channel, so as more and more people jump on there, we try and answer questions and stuff like that. Instagram is a great one. Like you'll reach me directly. I usually try and respond if I can. So
Hmm.
we try and like talk to people as much as we can. Like I said, we took a little bit of a break, but I think we'll be back next month.
And previously, you mentioned as well you were the co-founder of Pixel Architects, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so for example, when know how that started, but what was the idea behind it to create that?
It's just, like many people, you end up doing like competitions and ideas on the side just to like do your own kind of stuff. And it's really just a collection of, a group of friends and people that we work together with. And we work on competitions or little ideas that we think, um, have some kind of impact in our future of sustainable living. So or it could just be something fun, right? So we've
Hmm.
done we've done some projects where we propose things for Burning Man, and we're working to try and bring one to Burning Man. We kind of, one of the projects that kicked it off was called Pixel Facade, where we designed like we kind of were interested in a few different things, like, you know, how do we build more sustainably? How do we build faster? Because we kind of, you know, the construction industry is one of the few industries that's actually declining in efficiency. So we're actually building slower now
Mm-hmm.
than we've ever built before, which is kind of like, imagine your computers get slower like as like we progress through time. So we kind of like were really interested in some of these questions, and we started to kind of, you know, look into what is the future of construction. Is it 3D printing? Is it like modular construction and all this kind of stuff? And we started to find like answers to these problems. So, you know, mass timber is actually really you know, the future of kind of sustainable building. And we did
Mm-hmm.
this project like, when did we do the project? I think maybe 5 years ago now. And now everyone's building with mass timber, and like that kind of caught on. And then we're also kind of, oh, how do we actually, you know, how can we create like an office building using a modular system, but uh, have the ability to make it contextual. So we're using a modular system, but it's capable of creating many different forms. So that's where we kind of tapped into the combination of modular elements driven by computational processes. So like we can take these modular components, but we can configure them in like many different ways, so that you
Mm-hmm.
could create like a system for designing things, rather than how we traditionally work, where, you know, you traditionally, like the way that we work as architects is kind of stupid. We like design a building, everything has to be like new. We finish the project and we're like, throw that away. We're never going to do that idea again, and let's start on something new. But the idea of like, you know, if you're building a system, like a way to put all these modular components together in different ways, so it's interesting and contextual. But then the next site you go onto, you all the stuff you've learned from that first project, you bring with you in the form of, you know, details or the scripts, or, you know, whatever it is. The modules are getting better and better, and you kind of, you know, it's a much more intelligent way of working. It's like you know, how the car and aerospace industry work. I find it crazy when, like, you know, you see on the zine that Big will post a new project, or, you know, Zaha posts a new project or something like that, and you get people in the comments like, oh, it looks so big, or it looks so Zaha. It's like such an odd thing to say. It's like if you see a Ferrari driving by, you're like, oh, it looks too red and Ferrari. Why don't they pick another color? Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I don't know. There's
Definitely.
something about us as architects. It's like you can't repeat the same thing twice, or like you got to throw all this knowledge away and start again, which is kind of silly. But so yeah, we started to do projects and competitions and ideas that we think were interesting and had some kind of positive effect on our future as architects. Like, how can we as architects play a big role in creating a more sustainable future? The construction industry is a huge component of, you know, production of um, greenhouse gases and
Mm-hmm.
carbon and all this kind of stuff, but you don't hear as much about it, right? We hear so much about you know, electric cars and Tesla, and all this kind of, you know, these companies doing these innovative things, but the construction industry has a way bigger impact than, you know, transport. So you just don't see it as much. So I think as architects, we do have a bit of a role to play in like creating a more sustainable future, and that's kind of what gave birth to Pixel. It's just friends and colleagues working on ideas that we think, um, you know, had some kind of component that positively impacted our future.
That's very interesting. I definitely will keep following that, because even the design itself of the pixel, well, in general, is quite interesting. As you say, like the modular design and create
Yeah,
different interesting shapes.
I've always been interested in kind of this idea of digital modular construction. Like, there must be a more intelligent, efficient way for us to build in the future. but it doesn't seem like anyone's cracked that code successfully yet. So we'll see.
Definitely. And I saw it on your Instagram that you travel quite a lot, not in terms of architecture, but nature itself.
Yeah,
And which I believe is one of the side of you that like to travel and explore, which is very interesting. And just yeah, please just talk a bit more about that and like how,
yeah,
because you did America, you went to Arizona,
yeah.
Utah as well.
Yeah,
So.
Utah's a crazy beautiful place. It's so yeah, I think, well, one thing I've been lucky, like, because I've lived in, as you travel and live somewhere like Hong Kong, New York, you obviously, it's a new base, right? So you can travel as much as you can, and I've always had this interest in traveling. I really do think it broadens the mind, and you get so much inspiration and ideas when you're traveling, and you just kind of break away. But it's also partly, I've been working very hard over the last few years, and I think you need to. I love city life and all that kind of stuff, but what I found works best for me to kind of recharge is to uh, go away for a week and do two things. One, break into somewhere very like nature rich, whether it's the
Mhm.
mountains or go to the beach or something like that, and combine it with some kind of activity. So if it's mountain, you go skiing. If it's on the beach, you maybe go surfing. Um, like you saw in Utah, is like you go somewhere with an incredible landscape and you go hiking and stuff like that. So I've just found that to be a really great way to, recharge the batteries, escape from hectic city life. We work crazy as architects. We work a lot of hours and stuff. And I think, you know, it broadens the minds, but I think it's also, was always driven or attracted to like just escaping into somewhere rich in nature and doing some kind of activity. I struggle to do holidays where like you just sit on a beach and drink a few cocktails and stuff. Like I could do it for a day and then I'm like, I kind of need to
Yeah.
do something. But yeah, I think as architects, traveling is if you can travel, it really broadens the mind, and you get to see all these different kind of cities and like the different characteristics of how that city work and how the architecture is and the construction is in that space. But also you meet different people and you expand your horizons and things like that. So yeah, I think if you can travel as much as you can, and also for like your own mental health, escaping and just doing some kind of activity, and getting out somewhere nature rich. Like I just went to Scotland and hired a little Defender truck and drove around Scotland for a few days and just hiking and stuff like that. So yeah, that's been my way to kind of recharge a little bit.
No, that's very interesting because I do quite relate to that as well. And I'm not sure if you've been, but I suggest for I've done solo trekking in Iceland,
Oh,
to
cool.
this specific trail, and the views are just amazing. Like
Yeah, it's
I
on.
caught snow. I went in June, but I catch snow, rain, sun, oh everything really. And
Really?
yeah, I'll send you the link of the
Yeah,
trail.
it's on
It's
my
amazing.
list because I mean, when I used to live in New York, I was like, it's kind of like in the middle between London and New York. Maybe one day I'll stop, but yeah, that's on the list. I think you can do. Isn't there like is it Iceland? There's like a massive ring road. You can drive all the way around it. Is that?
Yeah, I think you can do that. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
done that one.
that
Um,
that's yeah, that's on the list.
and maybe a bit more like personal or professional question. But how would you see yourself in 10 or 20 years time?
Yeah, that's a tricky question. 10 to 20. That's a big one. Um, I think there's for sure, I'd like to see, the things I'm working on continue to progress like anyone. I think I've always been interested in being a bit more entrepreneurial. So, I've been interested in starting businesses and businesses that also have some kind of impact, whether it's teaching or like, designing more sustainable architecture and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I think it's going to be really interesting to see where how the architecture industry evolves. Like, I can see architecture practices getting smaller. I think we'll see architecture practices like you'll have smaller groups of what Randy Deutsch calls super users. So, like, architects that can design, they have the technology skill set, they have, like the full package. And smaller studios will be able to compete with these big studios where they're just kind of, throwing more, manpower, human power at projects. So I think it'd be really interesting to see how uh, we survive as architects. Also, we got like these big giants coming into the space, like Google's and Amazon's, and these tech companies are getting into architecture and housing and stuff like that. So, are we gonna work for like Google and these big companies, or are architects gonna survive? Because we're also kind of, you know, a little bit. It's a little bit our own faults, but we kind of are just becoming more and more image creators, right? We've lost connection with building and making things. But I think more and more architects that adopt digital tools, I think you'll see them flourish. Whereas if you don't, I think it'll be a bit more of a struggle in the future. But let's say 10 years, because that's a bit more. I could see 10 years, 20 years. Who knows? We could be like, there's
Absolutely.
World War III about to start, so who knows where we are in 20 years? But yeah, hopefully we'll see architecture practices we'll see more really interesting small studios that are able to compete. I think we'll see architects using technology to streamline our process so we can spend more time designing and less time, working late producing stuff.
Hmm.
And then also, will we see us as architects reconnecting with the act of making? So using digital fabrication, like not only am I going to design a house, I can go and 3D print it because I've bought a machine, and like there's literally a cable going from my computer to my 3D printer outside, and I'm printing homes and stuff like that. So, um, hopefully we'll see architects really playing a role in a more sustainable future, utilizing technology to do that. Or maybe we'll be doing this podcast from the moon or from Mars. Who knows?
One day, one
Yeah,
day.
first moon
uh,
podcast. That'll be quite cool.
well, we might be quite close than we think
Yeah,
to that.
yeah,
We'll see.
yeah,
No, I mean, it's been quite a rich topic conversation that we had on this podcast, and
yeah.
we are now 50 minutes, and I can't thank you enough for being our guest and participating today with us. No,
No
definitely,
worries.
and thank you for that.
No, thank you for
And
having me. I can talk all day. Don't worry. That's it. You can go in all these different directions with podcasts. It's kind of fun.
Maybe I'll just gonna give you some the last question,
Sure, sure.
and perhaps one of the audience, when they see your name, or probably when they see Bjarke Ingels Group,
Yeah,
is what they will be interested at. What advice or recommendation, based on your experience to applying for big and working out big, would you give to students or even to architects that they thinking to work at big,
yeah,
in terms of it could be really general in terms of what they should include in their portfolio, or the skills they should have,
yeah.
or what the things they're big looking at.
I think you know the base thing is, of course, work on your portfolio, create a great portfolio. The portfolio is like the the lifeblood of applying to jobs, right? You spend some time on your portfolio, because I remember when I graduated, you're kind of dead. You like finish the projects and then you're like, oh God, I need to make a portfolio. But it's important. And there's some great resources online. It's about just creating clear and simple ways to communicate your projects, right? Tell a story in your projects as well. It's not just like a gazillion images. There's some really great
Hmm.
YouTube channels like Steven's Show It Better and Upstairs. They do loads of like portfolio stuff. Also, Blessed Arc. We've done portfolio reviews with them from people at Big, people at like Zaha, people at all these Fosters, all these different companies. So you can get some really good bits of advice there. Otherwise, beyond applying, let's say you have a great portfolio, you apply. I think we live in a world of social media and stuff like that, and it's so much easier to connect with people. So I do get people messaging on LinkedIn and stuff like that, and um, you know, reaching out to people does help. You can go and like reach out to someone in the office and hey, I just applied. Like my name's Olly. Would you take a look at my portfolio? And sometimes it will go through, sometimes it won't. But I think for me, I find those like quite good. It shows that you're like more proactive. Um, I've never seen anyone like stop by the office and hand in their portfolio or something like that. Maybe I shouldn't advise that. There'll be like too many people, but doing those kind of
Here's some
things.
advice.
Yeah, but one of the things that this is more as I got to the like specialist side, but going to conferences and events, the architecture world is actually quite small, and you see the same people at these kind of events, whether it's like a computational meetup or just an architecture meetup. For example, in London, they have Rhino user groups. If you go to one of those, guess what? There's like people from all these firms around London, and you make that personal connection. It goes a long way. So I think in addition to creating a great portfolio and working on projects, um, you can also do a bit of networking. It goes a long way, whether that's online through LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, or if it's in person. If you can go to London and go to some of these events, you can meet people, and that goes a long way.
Hmm.
And I think that's sometimes forgotten a little bit in this like super digital world that we live in. And of course, after COVID, everyone's kind of online and working from home and stuff like that. But yeah, great portfolio. Networking is super important, whether it's digital or in person. Try and tell a little bit of a story of what the project is about, what you're about. Also, don't be afraid to maybe try something new that's different. Like sometimes you get people submitting a video portfolio or sending something on social media. I think it's don't be afraid to think outside the box. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and
And also,
thank you so
wait,
much for your
one other
advice.
good piece of advice is like the way architecture firms work is it's project based, right? So if you see online, Big has just won a competition, you're probably going to be hiring soon for that. And all of this stuff happens quite quickly. So, if you see, let's say you've applied before and you didn't hear back, and then you see like, oh, Big just won a competition. We just won a new project in London. We're we're probably thinking about hiring in London soon. So maybe like resend your portfolio again, or refresh the kind of link, or reach out to someone on LinkedIn and stuff like that. So that's also a good one. Is like keep an eye on the zine and the AJ and all the stuff for what's going on, because it can just be one project comes in and you need to hire 10 people. So that's also like a sneaky way to know when firms are like hiring. But if you're a
Uh,
student right now and you're listening to it, we hire every summer for design assistants, which is usually like part one, summer kind of placements and stuff like that. So that's the only one that's a bit more seasonal.
mhm.
Yeah. And
Oh
if
no,
if you
thank you for that.
apply and you don't get in the first time, doesn't matter. Apply again if you see it. I applied like a few times before I got into Big, so it's not like if they didn't see you this time, keep working, keep developing your skill set, and next time you'll be even better. And
Persistent is
yeah,
the key, isn't
yeah,
it?
that's it.
Oh, that's great. No, thank you very much for that, Ali.
No worries.
And yeah, we I mean, yeah. I was just saying, I was just say to thank you for that. Really, again, as I said, like was really interesting topics and conversation that we had,
Yeah,
and hopefully our audience can engage with us with this podcast episode as well, and on the comments. But yeah, no, thank you again for your time, Ollie.
yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, like I said, reach out anytime. You can find me on Instagram. It's Olly_T. You can follow us on architect.network on Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. Instagram is usually where we post like what's coming up, podcasts that are coming, courses. So yeah, come join us on our next course. We'll be doing a BIM course soon. So and reach out anytime. I'm always happy to like answer people's questions and say hello.
On our video version on YouTube, we'll put all these links so people can be
Great.
informed with your work as well, and to the Instagram too. So again, thank you, Olly.
Cool.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Pedro.
Thank you.